Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and JLT3 has come and gone, and once again we learned a little bit extra about some of the key SuperCoach selections that we're dealing with through this pre-season as we try to finalise our SuperCoach sides for 2017. Got a couple of pages here full of names, full of options as I take a look at each game, and if you missed a few games I've got you covered. I've got a few stats, got a few players that we should be keeping our eyes on, so I'll roll through those as I always do. I try to cover off on all the more notable ones, a few guys who may have stood out with SuperCoach relevance, and there's plenty we learned from this weekend. I'll cover it all. In particular, I think we learned a bit in our ruck division, so stay tuned for that slightly towards the end of the podcast. But we'll start with the Dogs in Brisbane, and of course the Lions welcome a few stars back and also welcome a victory over the reigning premiers. But first off, from the Dogs, there wasn't too much floating around. Jack McRae was probably the main one, and he was okay from all reports, not fantastic, but statistically found 17 touches and laid the 7 tackles, so still wasn't winning a heap of inside ball, just the 5 contested touches, but there's also the 7 tackles next to his name. You know, I've seen a few comments that he didn't light the world on fire and wasn't amazing, but as far as I'm concerned, he's still a lock and he didn't do any harm to his chances, I feel. Over at Brisbane though, I definitely think there were quite a few options, and none more so than Dane Beams. Now, I recently did a player profile on him. Of course, he's recently been named the captain, and all of a sudden, because he's been named captain, people almost have this renewed faith in his body. Well, I know that being named captain is great honour and things like that, but it doesn't change that his knees are as dodgy as anyone's. But, you know, that's another story. He did impress on the night. 24 touches from 64% game time, 10 contested and 4 clearances. And the knock on Beams has never been his output. We know if he's out there, he's going to be scoring extremely well. The concern is on his body. Now, he only played 2/3 of the game. A good return, no doubt, but I'll personally just be waiting and seeing how he goes, and I would doubt he'd be in my side. I just have too many concerns about his body. But if you're a Beams fan or need a bit of a little push to be convinced, you got that little push. Jake Barrett, 17 touches, kicked a goal from 66% game time. I think he'll be thereabouts come the Lions round 1 team. Could be in the mix. He's at 127k. Could slot him into your midfield. Could be an option, and he's playing well. Tommy Rockcliffe, 13 touches, also from your 2/3 game time. The Lions look to get in that 2/3 amount of game time to a lot of players. And Rockcliffe, he's playing a little bit forward at times, and I think he will rest there, maybe slightly more than some other mids, but I wouldn't be too concerned. I still feel his best footy is certainly in the midfield, and be crazy to waste such a fantastic player in the forward line. Stephen Martin, we learned a bit about as well. He actually exited my team. He's been in there since day dot, and he left it over the weekend. 8 touches, struggled to find the ball. Normally he's more of your around the ground sort of man. He did have 31 hit-outs and dominated, which was a pretty undermanned Bulldogs ruck department with pretty much Timmy English leading the way. Only 1 hit-out to advantage though. Interesting to note. And my main concern though is that Archie Smith, 16 hit-outs. I really am getting the vibe that they're going to share it quite consistently and somewhat evenly. I think Martin will be the man, but we need him to be the sole man, and I feel as if Smith is impressing enough and is a different type of ruckman to Martin, and I feel like he will play a reasonable amount of game time in the ones for the Lions this year, and that's just scaring me off a little bit. I think Martin comes in that category where, you know, pre-season games don't mean everything to everyone, but Martin fell in that category for me personally, where I just needed to be a bit reassured on his selection. He hasn't given me that, he's given me doubt, and off the back of that he has exited my side. So also McCluggage just finally racked up the 12 touches from 3/4 of a game. I think he'll still be in a fair few sides. I personally think he's maybe a bit expensive for the output he is giving us at the moment, considering such depth in the Lions midfield, but I think he's a very good player and will certainly have his good games where he shows why he was such a high draft pick. Moving on to the Giants and Sydney, Heath Shaw did what he did. 24 touches, 19 kicks. That's just how sure he rolls these days, and I think we can select him with confidence. Dylan Shield, I'll say it now, I reckon he's going to explode. I know you've seen him in my teams in the past. Is he in my team at the moment? He's actually not. I've just found a few guys that I feel are slightly better options, but I would not be surprised if he explodes into the real elite category. I really think he's going to have a fantastic season. Whether that puts him into the top 10 mids, I'm not too sure, because ceiling has been a concern for him at times, and also such a spreading of points over the Giants team. But I really think Shear will rack up the most Brownlow votes for the Giants and could even push his way to the top 5 vote getters in the comp. There's my little prediction. Josh Kelly, I suppose, was the man who got everyone talking though. Just 41% game time, racked up 16 touches, 5 inside 50s, 2 clearances. Now I think he's about the 473k mark. He's long been touted as a future Jet, future champion of the game, and I think we're starting to see the reasons why. He's explosive, he's dynamic, and I think he could definitely be an option for our sides. Whether you go with him or not is another question. I mean, I've seen a few people go with him if you're a big fan, but you've got to be a big fan, I tell you, because that's an awkward price, and you're picking him on the basis that he will turn into a premium keeper. And I personally don't see it happening. I think at 470 odd K, that's a huge risk. He's not going to make you stacks of cash. You want him to be a keeper, and I don't see him overtaking so many guys that have been year on, year out, just performers for our SuperCoach sides. But he'll certainly improve. How much will be the question, and a lot of people at this stage are thinking it's big time. Callum Mills is another man that a lot of people are expecting big things from. 20 touches, 5 rebound 50s, and 77% time on ground. No clearances, I should say, from the young man, which suggests that that midfield role that has been promised probably won't happen as frequently. I think he will roll through there, but I feel Heaney didn't play this game. I definitely feel like Heaney has his hands on that midfield spot where Mills has that first dibs of a rotation, but also your playmaker off the half back line. Just looking at it from a statistical point of view, 0 clearances, 5 rebound 50s, definitely suggests like a playmaker. I must say I didn't see the game. It wasn't great conditions either, so probably not the best game to judge SuperCoach stuff from. Lance Franklin, he thrived in the wet conditions. Top scorer for the Swans, 16 touches, couple of goals as well. Pretty impressive return to the top level for Lance. And Darcy Cameron as well. I wanted to just quickly touch off on him. Didn't do too much. He was only on the ground a little bit. 30% game time for him. 6 touches, 4 marks, 2 were contested. So I think he's definitely got a few attributes. A lot of people are looking at him for maybe an R3 position. And I think at the moment there's a lot of Swans putting their hand up who can do ruck work. You got Naismith, you got Tippett, you got your Cameron, you've got the bloke who I can't think of his name at the moment as well. Still escaping me. I'm sure you know it at home. So I don't think Cameron's probably in line for a position just yet for that real ruck spot. But Callum Sinclair, that was the man I was trying to think of. He was on the tip of my tongue there. But I wouldn't have thought Cameron is going to probably push too many of those guys out. He probably needs to find another role to play, or maybe get an injury if he is to get games. But nonetheless, we shall flip the page here and move on to our next little category of games. Carlton and St Kilda. Couldn't even read my own writing there. Not much from a Blues front. Paddy Cripps returned. He was eased into the game, didn't play much more than a half. 7 touches, 1 contested, so he was clearly kept out of the clinches, and obviously they opted to give a bit more opportunity to their younger players, and they were thumped by the Saints, and they're starting to struggle as a club, the Blues. It's only pre-season, but there's some concerning signs. We should see a bit of youth in their lineup this season, and Jared Pickett will be a man that we hope gets a few games. He's more of an impact player, that's for sure. He had the 7 touches, does some nice things, and I think if we do see him named round 1, it'll be real tempting to get him, and we may not have any a plethora of options, but he's not going to be a guy that we whack in our sides and is going to score consistent points. He may be one of those frustrating cash cows, so you just hope that he can lock in that small forward position. he'll do some fantastic things and then you won't see him for a quarter. I think that's probably the type of player we'll see him be at the start of his career. He's been around a while but hasn't quite got on the park very often. As for the Saints, well, we got dealt a couple of Jacks, and it was Jack Billings and Jack Steele. Billings, of course, racked up the 30 touches and has quickly come into consideration for many people. Didn't attend many centre bounces, and if my memory serves me correct, I think I read he didn't turn up at one, I think. Nonetheless, he is a player that has to be considered. He's an exciting player and a match winner. We've seen it in the past. We've seen his best footy. Just a matter of whether he can get consistent midfield time. Bear in mind, not all the Saints midfielders were in there. Stephen was rested through as well, and they weren't all fit and firing for this game, managed and whatnot. But Billings certainly showed what he's all about. Really impressive, a dynamic player, a smart player, and I think if he's given a fair bit of midfield time as opposed to just your half-forward flank, we could see some really good scores. Again, it's that real battle of will he advance his points per game by 10, by 15, by 20? Make up your mind on that number and you'll make up your mind on him, because he needs to be a keeper at that price. You're not getting him as a cash cow. He needs to explode and be a keeper, so that's a decision for you guys. But Jack Steele did what he does. 25 touches, 12 contested, 8 tackles from the 69% time on ground. An extremely hard player. That's what he's been brought to for the St Kilda Football Club. That's what they need from him, and I expect him to deliver that. Probably not to that quantity week in, week out. I think he'll still be a little bit inconsistent, and I don't feel like he's the sort of guy we want to be banking on at what is an awkward price, and a price where we really need to see him up his points big time. And I think he's probably going to have you the games where you go, yep, that's why we've thought about him as a real promising player for a number of years. But I wouldn't be selecting him with too much confidence over the course of the season. So, food for thought there, but he was impressive. Bailey Rice didn't do too much. He was fairly quiet, just the 9 touches. Paddy McCartan, he's not really SuperCoach relevant, but he's arguably got the best dukes in the game. And I reckon he'll be a player we think about in years to come. Maybe even next year, maybe even the back half of 2017. But I don't think we'll be considering him quite yet. But gee, he can take a mark, and if he puts it all together, he could be one of the best forwards in the comp and really be one of those key position players that's hard to look past. But probably not for this season, I must say. Fremantle and Collingwood. Now this was probably the big takeaway message from me from the weekend. And it's one that I could probably spend a lot of time on, but I'll try and keep it concise. And it's Aaron Sandilands. Now, as I mentioned, Stephen Martin, Thursday night, confirmed that he was out of my team. There are a couple of things I needed to see from him, and I didn't see it. Then I thought, well, who's going to come in for him? Is it going to be Sandilands? Is it going to be Nankervis? Sandilands produced a fantastic game and found his way into my side. 20 hitouts, couple of contested marks, 15 touches, 9 of those contested, 79% time on ground, and it was the Sandilands that we know and love. A fantasy jet, gets the ball on the ground, gets your odd clearance, cannot be outmarked, cannot be beaten in the ruck contest, is no third man. Could be a fantastic little recipe here. But we've got to consider the fact that he's injury prone as all hell, got terrible calves, a shocking toe, and he's about 35 years old, the big fella. So it's a massive risk, and especially in the ruck, because if he goes down and it's looking like we won't have any coverage at ruck 3, and as you know, I'm not going Ryder, I'm not going Boyd, I'll probably be putting all my eggs in the Sandilands basket, which is yet to be seen. My side is still in progress, and for the first time in a while I made a couple of changes to it. Just had to see a few things happen. They did, made changes accordingly. I'm not 100% sold on Sandilands, but at this stage he is in my team. Fraught with danger, but at 308k, if he comes off and does well, it could be an extremely good get. He will play forward a little bit more. I think he'll share the ruck a little bit with Griffin, and the Dockers are struggling in attack. They don't really have a focal point. Tabner's doing okay. McCarthy they'll hope the best for, but they still don't have a key target. I think Sandilands will be that at times, but I certainly think we'll see enough ruck contest from him to really warrant his selection. He's so cheap, and a bit like Beams, I think the concern is about his body. I think if he's out there, he scores. He just gets hit outs, wins it on the deck, and takes marks. I think we can bank on his scoring. Otherwise, for the Dockers, another lock is Nat Fyfe. 19 touches, does what he does, 6 clearances, lock him in. I said it last time, I'll probably say it next week. Lock the bloke in. Most popular player in SuperCoach at the moment, and rightly so. As for the Pies, they welcomed quite a number of their stars back, and I'll run through a few of those. Brodie Grundy, 16 touches, just 2 contested, which is unlike him, but I think he'll be better for the run. You know, he's still in many a side, and I think he's looking like a pretty reasonable selection, particularly with Martin dropping off, concerns around Goldstein. Gawn is so expensive. I think Grundy will be popular. Pendlebury, 19 touches, say no more. He'll do what he does. He's a fantastic player. Bank on him every day of the week. Adam Treloar, 16 touches, 5 clearances, kicked a lovely goal. I think Pendlebury and Treloar could almost be a bit like what Dangerfield and Selwood are of last year. Now, I know you've seen the articles, it's been in the press a little bit, all these nicknames that they come up with for the 2 best midfielders, but you know, this is no knee-jerk reaction. I've certainly felt that Pendlebury and Treloar are very good selections and have thought that for a long time. As you would have seen in my first SuperCoach video, or SuperCoach side, they were both in there. So I reckon they're very good players, and I think they could be one of your top scorers, maybe even both in the top 6 to 8 scorers in 2017, but we'll wait and see. Will Hoskin-Elliott had your 12 touches, 3 clearances. You know, he's a guy who also has to convince a bit, and he probably hasn't done enough. He's done some okay things, but probably hasn't done enough to really warrant selection at what is a awkward sort of price. Taylor Adams, 21 touches, 69% time on ground. You know, good to get a run under his belt, and I think it'd be a great selection in our back line. Matty Scharenberg, just the 7 touches from 35% time on ground. I think concerns have to sort of be starting to be raised over him. Keefe also didn't play, and I must say both those guys really have a question mark hovering around them at the moment. I think Scharenberg's not getting enough game time to really feel like he's in their best 22, and when he does get opportunity, he's not really racking it up. He looks like a guy who's maybe struggling with the pace of the game and a little step behind the AFL field that he's, you know, not stepped onto for so long. I think of the 3 sort of just above rookie price guys in our back line, the likes of Scharenberg, Keefe and Hampton. Certainly Curtly Hampton is the one to be picking at this stage and is at the top of the pecking order, but I'll touch on him in a moment. So, bit of a wrap up from that game. Moving on to Adelaide and Geelong. Pretty close game here. Of course, being a Cats man, I'll listen in closely to this one. Matty Crouch racked up the 28 touches, 11 contested, 7 clearances, 4 tackles. Real SuperCoach pig numbers. Just really locking in, going hard, bulk numbers. I just wonder whether he could really go big. I've got a mate who's a massive fan of him, really going with him. I'm not as sold on him. I think he'll be a very good player. I think one day he could be in your top 12 scorers potentially. I just don't feel like the risk, or the reward I should say, outweighs the risk for this one. As you know, I'm taking no risks in my midfield. Go straight up guns, bugger your mid-price, bugger your players who are on the verge of elite. I'm just going the ones that I can bank on. And Matty Crouch, as good as his numbers are, remember last pre-season, fantastic as well. I think he'll go even better in the season proper this year, and will have those big numbers, but I'm just not sure he's ready to be selected at that price to be what would need to be a top 12 mid. You know, when you go through the list of great midfielders in the game, it takes some serious breaking into to get into that elite category. And as good as Crouch is, I don't know if he's going to quite be there, but some will go with him. If it pays off, he'll certainly be a point of difference. Rory Laird racked up your 23 touches. Fantastic player, rebounds all day long, pretty hard as well. Should be in many sides. Andy Otten, 17 touches. Played, I think, nearly 100% of game time, so that's good for not only the body, but showing that he can be a part of the Adelaide back 6. And that's probably the question. I mean, he's a mature age player, played plenty of games, not going to be a huge scorer, but the question is he in the back 6? And if we can find that out, and he is, then he'll be a great selection for our back line. We can just put him there. It'll be a slow grind with him, but if we know that he's in the best 22, then I think he can just be one of those guys who appreciates nicely over time. Not quickly, but, you know, by rounds 8 8 or 9, he's earned you quite a bit of cash. So wait and see what he does next week and where he fits into that final hit out. But he could be a player who can make us some nice cash. As I mentioned, Curtly Hampton, 17 touches, ran through the midfield at times, was used a bit on Selwood as well. So I think Don Pyke's certainly exposing to him a number of roles, and I get the feeling that he is certainly in the mix. I think he's got a bit of X factor, started to take the game on a little bit at times. I wouldn't be surprised if he is named round 1. I think that's probably not surprising anyone by me saying that, but I think he should certainly be in your back line at the moment. And if he isn't by any means taken out, then we can, drop him down to what is a pretty healthy looking back line of rookies that we have to select from. But this stage, certainly worth just having there in your back line at, D4, D5, D6, whatever it may be, because I think he'll be a popular selection, and rightly so. Harrison Wigg also looked pretty good. Only played the 56% time on ground, so didn't play the whole game. But, second for the side with clearances. That was 4 behind Crouch, who had 7, and he racked up 12 touches, Harrison Wigg. So I reckon he's really in the mix. I know the Crows had a fair few midfielders out, but I feel like Wigg, 2017 is really the year he needs to impress. He's been around for a little while, and it gets to a stage in a player's career where it's sort of moving day. It's day 3 on the golf tour. It's about time that they make the move from SANFL player to AFL player, and I feel like Wigg's on the brink. Had a pretty good pre-season so far, and he's sitting on my bench at the moment, and I'll really be watching his space there because I think he's a good player. Moving on to the Cats, Zach Toohey. Now, he is in my side at the moment. At first, I thought, Shorty, what are you doing? Zach Toohey, never really been a good scorer before. Uncontested sort of player. What are you doing? But he's made his way into the side. 27 touches, no clangers, 89% disposal efficiency. Very similar to what he did against the Hawks. And it's not necessarily a statistical thing that I'm talking about here, but following the Cats closely, we need a player like Toohey, and watching the games, we are playing like a team who needs a player like Toohey. We want the ball in his hands on every occasion, designated kicker. We're using him out of the back line at all costs. Now, I think, a bit like you see with those key rebounding defenders, the side loves to get the ball in their hands, and I feel like that's what we'll get from Toohey. I'm really expecting easily 90 plus, maybe even around the 95 to 98 sort of mark. That's a big call, but unless he gets some attention, which could happen if he gets a bit of a tag, but if he's left to go about his own business, I think it'd be hugely damaging, capable of kicking a goal, and no doubt Geelong will look to go through him. Make no doubts about that. We will look to give him the ball. Look at our back line. Lonigan, Taylor if he's there, Mackie, Kolajasny. Thurlow's a good ball user. Ruggles, Stewart. It's about it. Thurlow's probably the only good ball user. Then you got Toohey. So mark my words, he'll be a dynamic player out of the back line and a really effective user by foot. So he's in my side. I think he's nicely priced. You may not agree with me. You might think there's probably better options out there. I couldn't argue with you. A lot of people are going to have Taylor Adams, Rory Laird, maybe a Doherty, maybe a Shaw. That'll be a popular starting 3 defenders. Maybe Toohey can be a bit of a point of difference. Moving on to Brandon Parfitt, listen to a few interviews from the Cats coaching staff. I get the feeling he's really in the mix for a round 1 spot. They like his attack on the ball, they like his pace, just the 12 touches on the weekend, so he didn't set the world on fire, but I get the feeling he's in the mix, as is Tom Stewart, 15 touches, and played 91% of the game, which shows that the Cats staff really gave him the opportunity to be a standalone sort of player in that back 6 and a real player who's going to be there consistently if all goes to plan. So I think that's something that we can really take to the bank, and he looks like a very good chance. It all depends where Taylor lines up as well, and whether they put the older Mackie in front of a Stewart. But if I was predicting at this stage, I would say Stewart is probably in our best 22, and I'd be expecting him to line up round 1. So that'll be great for our defensive rookies. Paddy Dangerfield, just a 42% time on ground, played the first half and was just great as well. 11 touches, 9 contested, just a few kilometres in the legs for Paddy, just what he needed. So, don't have to tell you anything new about Paddy. Zach Guthrie, 18 touches, 2 contested marks for the young man. I reckon I weigh a bit more than him, and he'd taken contested grabs on an AFL field. Very impressive, but I wouldn't have thought he's in line for a senior berth. I know he's nicely priced and he's had some good pre-season games, but I don't think Guthrie's quite in the mix just yet. But he's certainly doing his chances no harms with some of these performances. A man who isn't doing his chances a great deal was Aaron Black. Not very impressive, only played the half, had just 7 touches, a bit of an absolute clanger when he dropped the mark, cost us a goal. He was good first week against the Hawks, not so good this week, so probably still up in the air. As I mentioned with Taylor, with our forward structure, how it is all going to work will be very dependent on where we go with Black and whether we select him, where he really falls into it. So that'll be interesting. I still am pretty confident with where he's at. I think he'll probably still be in our team, but certainly didn't have the greatest day on the weekend against the Crows. Just finally, moving on to Port Adelaide and Richmond. Couple of rucks that people are discussing. Paddy Ryder, only the 5 touches, and I don't think he touched the ball in the first half from memory. 23 hit-outs. Didn't see the game, was at work today, but it is one I would like to see, and you probably get a better gauge by watching it, how Ryder is looking, because I think it's key to see how he's going physically. But at this stage, I don't think he's really convincing a lot of people. He's not doing enough to cross him off the list, because he's getting plenty of time in the ruck, but he's probably not winning as much of the ball as people might like. But we'll have to wait and see. It'll be interesting to see how his ownership goes off the back of that. Sam Powell-Pepper, love the way this bloke goes about it. 13 touches, 8 of those contested, 8 tackles. You can lock him in. Going to be one of the most popular players in the comp, and rightly so. He's going to find his way into that Port Adelaide midfield and be a very good player. He's hard at it. It's exactly what the Port Adelaide midfield needs, and I think it'll be a very good selection. Hamish Hartlett, probably a few people still have him, considering him. 17 touches. He's not for mine. Not only is he injury prone, but I feel like he's probably not a real cog in that midfield anymore. More of your half-back flanker. And I think we really needed him to be in the midfield to really produce good scores. The reason he didn't produce good scores last year was because he played in that back 6 more so. Lovely kick, but I don't feel he get enough of it to warrant or deliver a 90-plus average. Brett Eddy, he's not getting a stack of game time. He's on the ground for 63% of the time. 7 touches, can take a mark. Took 3. He's capable of getting around the ground. Can hit the scoreboard, 1 goal, 2. He's doing okay. Again, I would like to see him play. There's probably people out there listening who saw the game who probably have a better gauge on him than I do. I reckon he's still thoroughly in the mix though, and while I'd like to see him next week get a little bit more game time, get a full game, see what he's really made of, at this stage he's got to be in the mix. And Chad Wingard, not really sure what happened to him there, just the 8 touches, 1 clearance, 61% time on ground. There was no midfield Chad. After all the talk about how good he was in the midfield, we didn't quite see that replicated on this occasion, but he should still be in the mix. He just didn't convince anyone big time like he did last week, but I still think we'll see him in the midfield a bit. I think he's maybe a little bit more riskier than, say, a Caddy or maybe even a Billings. Maybe he's starting to look at Billings more than Wingard, but very interesting. And finally, looking at the Tigers. You've probably waited for most of the podcast for me to talk about Toby Nankervis, because I think we're going to see his numbers of ownership skyrocket, and I couldn't blame you. He'd absolutely look fantastic. 15 touches, 22 hit-outs, 4 clearances, 5 tackles, and snagged a goal. I think one of the best debates over the next week or so will be Sandilands versus Nankervis. I think I'll do a video on it because it's a great little debate. The old versus the young, the proven versus the unproven, the potential versus the bankable. What's it going to be? We know what we're going to get from Sandy, but he's far riskier. Nankervis is risky for other reasons. Could explode and be the next gun ruck of the competition. Or he could just, when the player's unproven, you just cannot bank on them. So it's going to be interesting, but all signs point to good at this stage. Looks to be really getting his 2 hands around the number 1 ruck spot at this stage. He was fantastic, looked great from the whole game. Wins it on the ground as well. By reading up on him, his real model of a player is gets his knees dirty, wins it in the air, but is more than capable of tackling hard and getting it on the deck, and is pretty handy up forward. So I reckon he'll be in many teams at this stage. He's about 60k more expensive than Sandilands, but I really do think that he's going to be a popular selection. After Sandilands played so well, I was quietly hoping that Nankervis wouldn't play so well, just to not tempt me. Now I have this shocking little decision, and probably if I'm picking, I'm probably going Nankervis, but just the extra 60k really helps me upgrade elsewhere, which I might talk about another stage. But we all have those little debates in our own head. You know, you got to weigh it up. It's not just player versus player, it's how it affects your whole structure. You know, 60 to 70k can be crucial to how it affects your structure overall. But Nankervis was fantastic, and I think he'll be very popular, and he's looking extremely good. Josh Caddy wasn't as good, but still I have a fair bit of faith in him. 18 touches, the 2 clearances, just the 5 contested touches and the 3 tackles. Was overshadowed by a couple of other players, you know, a couple of lesser lights. Prestia wasn't out there, but you know, I get the feeling he didn't play as much in the guts. Again, I haven't seen the game. I'd have to really rewatch it to get a great gauge on that. But statistically, didn't set the world on fire. Also didn't cause any concern to really throw him out the window. But you know, someone to certainly keep your eye on. And finally, Dan Butler, 9 touches, did have 5 clangers, but did lay 5 tackles as well. Played a fair bit of the game. Now, if you're not aware of him, he's pretty cheap forward line option, rookie priced, been in the side, or on the list, I should say, for some time. Was emergency a number of times last year, and I think certainly knocking on the door of senior selection again. And I get the feeling he's probably somewhere on the Tigers list between 20 and 24. I reckon he'd be really close to a round 1 berth, and if he is, I think he should be in our sides, because Tigers forward line could probably do with a player like him, that forward pressure type, to help out a couple of, you know, your Riolis, etc. So certainly a player to keep an eye on. But gee, I could do with a drink of water. That took me only the 2 takes there, but you know, it took about a minute breather somewhere in the middle. And certainly reeled off quite a few names there. But hopefully you enjoyed it. These JLT Community Series wrap-ups have been quite popular actually so far. People are really getting around them and enjoying them. Now, obviously I don't see as much footy as some people out there, you know, busy weekends with work. But I feel like I can give a reasonable wrap-up just on the stats and reading and listening to quite a number of games as well. And hopefully it has been of benefit to you and you've enjoyed it. So if you have, give it a thumbs up and a like. Give me a comment as well. Some real good comments coming through with some really good thoughts on the weekend and certain players on our radars. And above all, subscribe to the channel. Nearly pushing the 600 mark, getting some great numbers day after day. Really pushing that number up quickly, which is fantastic. Would love to get to close to 700 by the time round 1 starts. That's pretty ambitious, but I'd love to. Facebook page as well, get along to that. A few videos getting pumped through there as well, and I'm nearly up to date from what becomes on the YouTube channel to the Facebook channel. Facebook is nearly caught up content wise, so that'll be pretty fresh and up to date as well. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll wrap it up there. This is going to be published pretty late on a Sunday night, but I thought it'd be better to get it out on a Sunday rather than wait into the morning. Hopefully do a bit of a late night SuperCoach research. So enjoy, guys, have a good one, and I'll catch you soon.